And he considered Dr. Anwar Ibrahim as the right person in the right position due to his expertise in economy, his long experience within, in managing the state. So he's the best choice, I think, for Malaysia.
What happened when the Arab Spring one of the most greatest success of the Arab Spring begins to unravel? 15 years ago, Tunisia inspired millions from other Arabs and Muslim countries due to its tremendous democratic transition. But today, many of its democratic leaders are either imprisoned, exiled, or being silenced. So what exactly happened? And what lesson should countries like Malaysia learn before it's too late for us? So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this special podcast session brought to you by IAIS Malaysia. I am Dr. Ahmad Badri Abdullah.
And I am Wan Naim Wan Mansor. And today we are deeply honored to be joined by Dr. Rafik Abdessalem, former Foreign Minister of Tunisia, scholar, strategist, and one of the key figures involved during Tunisia's post-Arab Spring democratic transition. Dr. Rafik is also widely known as a close intellectual and political associate of Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, one of the Muslim world's most influential contemporary Islamic thinkers and democratic reformists.
So, Dr. Rafik, thank you for being with us today. And let me begin by some more personal question or reflection from yourself. I think you serve as the Foreign Minister for Tunisia. I think during the most historic and turbulent times, I guess in the modern Arab history. Could you share with us what was the most unforgettable experience during that period of time that very important to you?
When you are Minister of Foreign Affairs, a lot of things happen. It's not just one event or two.
Yes.
Many things, but what is coming to my mind, I remember, 2012, we were in a conference, international conference, attended by roughly 92 countries all over the world, and it was headed at that time by Dr. Dawood, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, as well Hillary Clinton. And after the introduction of Dr. Oğlu and the foreign ministers of the United States, they opened the floor to me. They asked me, I've spoken, spontaneously without even reading a paper because I'm not prepared, to be the first speaker, after the introduction. So I've spoken that since the conference about fighting terrorism, I said that terrorism is due to the lack of democracy and freedom. And the Arab Spring sent a very positive message that we can't fight terrorism based on democracy and respecting human rights and political participation. And then suddenly, a Minister of Foreign Affairs in a Gulf country, I don't like to name him or the country, he said, I want to reply to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tunisia. What he said is completely wrong. I said, well, what is wrong? What I say wrong? He said, there is nothing to do between terrorism and lack of democracy. He felt that he was, let's say, he wasn't in a very positive mood, to say that terrorism is the byproduct of the lack of democracy and political participation. He said, terrorism is the byproduct of harsh ideology and nothing to do with democracy. And thank God we have our own political system, which is based on shura, and democracy is strange to our history and our tradition. So he felt, insulted by such a hypothesis. I'm wondering to myself, what is wrong? What I'm saying wrong? But this is, reflects the concrete reality that many countries in the region, mainly in the Gulf, was not happy with the Tunisian revolution, was not happy with the Arab Spring. And I attended many conferences, include, the conference of the Friends of Syria, the committee that prepared, different, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Americans, the German foreign minister, the French, the British, and I see the angry and missatisfaction of the many ministers of the Gulf countries, and they clearly, speak with the Americans. Said, we are the main cause for this mess that we have seen in the Middle East. How you allow, such, mess? Mess for democracy for them is a full mess, because the only way, to rule the Middle East is through dictatorship and despotic rulers.
Well, I think let's talk a little bit about your personal background. It's very interesting that you mentioned during your tenure as a foreign minister, you become this like an ambassador of Muslim democracy. As you mentioned, you've been, criticized or chastised by foreign ministers from these Gulf countries. Can you tell me a little bit about your background, what's your expertise in? I think it would be very interesting to know.
Well, my personal background, I studied in Tunisia, in 2 years in the university, my secondary school, and 2 years in the Tunisia University, which is called 9 April, 9 Avril University of Humanities. And then I moved to Morocco because I was an activist in the student union at that time. I was followed by the regime of Bourguiba, the last year of the ruling in '87. So I was obliged to move to Morocco. I finished my degree in Morocco in philosophy, Mohammed V University in Rabat. And then after finishing my degree, I moved to Britain because I can't go back to Tunisia because I was political activist or syndicalist, let's say, within the student union. I finished my master's and PhD in Britain. My background is in philosophy. I studied philosophy. I have a degree in philosophy, and then I want to continue in philosophy. But when I went to the university, we used to have a final research in the degree. This is the old system about Nietzsche and Heidegger, and I want to continue in the same trend. They told me this is a continental philosophy, and in Britain we have our own tradition, analytical philosophy, philosophy of language and analytical philosophy. I don't like philosophy of language. For me it's very formal. So I moved from philosophy to politics and international relations. But actually, the Department of Politics and International Relations, but I worked on political theory. And my thesis was on Islam, secularity, and modernity. And actually, my thesis was published in English in South Africa, I think, in the name of Islam and Modernity, an Unfinished Project. And I published this work in 2 volumes in Arabic, the first volume about secularity and democracy, and the second volume about modernity.
Is it while studying philosophy and political theory that you stumbled upon Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, or maybe even before that?
It could be. One of the reasons, the founding father as a model for us is Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, with his, philosophical background. But at that time, we have a lot of conflict with the leftist strands. And we need, intellectual tools to compete, with these leftist strands. And at that time, the university was very liberal. A lot of polemic discussions with nationalists, with leftists, and you need an intellectual tools, to fight with them. So this is what stimulated me, what pushed me, towards to study philosophy. I was granted to study law, but at the end of the day, I said, what can I do with law? It's very formal. I need some intellectual background, to fight and to deal with the challenges, the intellectual and political challenges of at that time.
Following from that, you are also closely connected to Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, at least now, not only politically, but personally and intellectually. So you're basically family now with Dr. Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi. So my question is, away from the public spotlight, what is Sheikh Ghannouchi actually like as a person? Or maybe as a mentor or an intellectual companion? What is it like having him as a father-in-law?
Well, Sheikh Ghannouchi is very dialogical person,
Dialogical.
Yeah, definitely. He's a very dialogical and communicative person. When you sit with him, he's very humble, and he tries to listen and benefits from different, trends, different personalities. different generations, include when he sit with the young people within the party or outside the party, he tried to benefit. And he's very keen, to learn from everything. I remember when he was in Britain, he used to write by his hand. Then he tried to use his laptop. He used, to write his text at that time on the computer, Macintosh. It's a long time. Yes, I remember very well.
The 90s.
But he was very keen to learn by himself, and he tried, to write down by the computer his text by himself, and then he's becoming very familiar. In all his meetings, he's using his iPad or laptop. So he tried, to learn. He considered knowledge as a learning process, even within his family. The members of the family, he tried to communicate with his children, daughters and son, and he benefits from them. Mr. Ghannouchi is very rational, but at the time he's very emotional. He's very emotional, He's affected by the mainly if something negative happens to the Muslim Ummah, he's very sensitive.
Yeah.
So he's living in local conditions in Tunisia, but his eyes, focused on the whole Islamic affairs, the Muslim Ummah. Yeah.
So Dr. Rafik, I think Sheikh Rached, he's associated with this reformist, open thinking tradition. I think it is due partly to his exposure to the Tunisian culture and also there's the institution that he is spending his life as a Tunah that you mentioned in our previous forum. So can you explain to us how that kind of intellectual sphere or environment shapes Sheikh Rached's thinking and mindset?
I think Sheikh Rached is the byproduct of this dual tradition, let's say.
Tradition.
Yeah, dual tradition, definitely. The local tradition or the Islamic tradition within the Zaytuna. Zaytuna is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, learning center in the Muslim world. It is, even before Al-Azhar University. And it was a flourishing, learning center in the North Africa and the whole continent, the African continent. It used to receive, different students all over the Muslim world, mainly from Africa.
It still exists,
Unfortunately not. Within the process of modernization after the independence, the regime of Bourguiba tried to dismantle it, and it is very weakened.
Yeah.
It is becoming just a small university within the educational system. So Mr. Ghannouchi is the byproduct of the Zaytuna tradition, as well the modern university. After he studied in Zaytuna, he went to Syria. He has his degree in philosophy in Syria, and then he moved to Paris. He was, registered in Sorbonne University, and then he was coming back to Tunisia. In the beginning, he thought that just a short visit to Tunisia, but then he stayed there, and he founded the Jama'a Islamiyya in the beginning, and then the MTE, Mouvement de la Tendance Islamique, the Islamic movement, tendency of Islamic movement. And since that time, he stayed there in Tunisia. I think Mr. Ghannouchi is the byproduct of this, traditional learning in Zaytuna. Bearing in mind that Zaytuna produced a lot of scholars, including, Ibn Ashur, Khadr Hassin. He's later on becoming, the head or the Sheikh Al-Azhar. Ibn Khaldun himself is the byproduct of Zaytuna. Many jurists and many fuqaha was, graduated and...
Long lines of luminaries.
Oh, yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Well, moving away from that, coming up to this, to the contemporary world, Sheikh Ghannouchi reportedly sent a letter to Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, reflecting on Tunisia's democratic setbacks, while also expressing some admiration for Malaysia's democratic trajectory. So can you tell us a bit about the letter, and what do you think were the most important messages or perhaps warnings contained in the letter, especially for countries like Malaysia?
Yeah, I think he considered, what happened in Malaysia with Dr. Anwar Ibrahim is, signal, a hallmark of Adil Ilahi, Allah justice, to move from the president to the head of the government. And he considered Dr. Anwar Ibrahim as the right person in the right position due to his expertise in economy, his long experience within, in managing the state. So he's the best choice, I think, for Malaysia. And he remember when they founded together, I think, ABIM at that time. So they have a long history together. And his message is that, you have to feel the privilege of Malaysia to be a democratic country and to protect your democracy. And I think this message is fully supportive to Dr. Anwar Ibrahim, as well his admiration for the Malaysian model. When you have a diversified and multi-ethnic, multicultural country, you need, such a coalition and the spirit and the method of Anwar Ibrahim, to bring together people on different strands based on the idea and philosophy or the art of coalition.
So when was this letter sent? Is it from the prison?
It was sent just a few days, 2 days, exactly 2 days before coming here to Malaysia. He met with his lawyer or lawyers.
Before came to Malaysia?
He was informed that I'm going to visit Malaysia. And then he said, I want Dr. Rafik to pass this message to our friends in Malaysia, made it to Dr. Anwar Ibrahim.
Inshallah.
Oh, amazing.
So Dr. Rafik, I think both Sheikh Rached and our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, I think both are towering figures that espouse the idea of Muslim democracy, and both are the towering figure for Muslim Democrats. They are both Muslim Democrats. So in your perspective, how significant is Malaysian current experience, political experience is important or significant towards the Muslim Ummah or Muslim global society at large at this current period? Yeah.
I think it's very important. When you see the full mess and fragmentation, civil wars, harsh despotism in the Muslim Ummah, mainly in the Middle East. Malaysia remains a very exceptional case, or other few cases in the Muslim world. Unfortunately, the dominant narrative within the Western circles that democracy is not functioning in the Muslim world. And they said, look what happened even after the Arab Spring. Democracy is not functioning. So the best way to have dictators in the name of stability and to impose stagnation in the name of stability in the Muslim world. Malaysia provides another alternative. It is possible to have political stability, which is based on political participation and democracy. So I think the Malaysian model is very important, not only for Malaysia, for Asia, but as well for the whole Muslim world. We are encursed by this dilemma of dictatorship and political despotism. And thank God that Malaysia is far away from Israel. If you are close to Israel, it's not easy to democratize.
Yes, exactly.
Because Israel is the main element of a trouble in the region. They will never allow you to live in a free space, to live the life of free democracy.
So I think back to Tunisia, Dr. Rafik. I think today's Tunisia, it feels different from the optimism that we felt during 2011 during the transition. I think, could you share with us the latest development inside Tunisia that maybe people from outside cannot understand it in full capacity, and especially regarding the political freedom, the political legitimacy that Tunisia should be enjoying right now? So
yes, in the appearance, and concretely speaking, yes, there is a setback in Tunisia. There is a regress. The experience that we have in the beginning in 2010, 2011, that democracy is in process. We are having nascent democracy, and the message that has been sent that time from Tunisia is that democracy is possible in the Arab world.
Yes, exactly.
So the general perceptions is that the region as a whole, mainly Tunisia, is moving towards a process of democratization. And our democracy survived at least 1 decade. And it was a great achievement, not only for Tunisia, but for the region as a whole. But suddenly in 2021, we have a coup d'etat, by a populist figure, president called Qais Said. He froze in the parliament, and then, dissolve it, crash the constitution or delete the constitution, and drafted his own constitution written by himself instead of the constitution of the revolution that was mandated by the Constitutional Assembly in 2014 as the main hallmark of the revolution, main achievement of the Tunisian revolution, that we have a new constitution will guarantee the freedom and public liberty. It provided the space of freedom. And this is not just a constitutional clauses. It is implemented concretely on the ground. Tunisia enjoyed a great space of freedom and political participation, and it was very exceptional in the modern history of Tunisia, even in the region as a whole. So the general perception at that time that Tunisia is moving in the right direction. But suddenly, we have a coup d'etat by a populist or anarchist, more accurately, a figure in the name of revolutionary slogan that will reform, the political system, and is, fighting corruption. But he dismantled everything. He dismantled the political institutions and the old achievements in the name of making a new revolution. So this is the dilemma that facing Tunisia today. But thank God this coup d'etat is very fragile. It is a complete failure in everything. In the beginning, he benefited from the political and health crisis that we faced in COVID-19. The people were a little bit angry. So he tried to exploit the general feelings of the people to topple, the democratic system. But as I said, the new political system is very fragile. There is no guarantee it could continue in this way because we have a very complex situation, and a political crisis which is combined with the social as well, economic crisis, and the people are frustrated and very angry to the situation. So, but let me, before that, because I've spoken about Mr. Ghannouchi, Dr. Ghannouchi, and his Zaytouni background. But this does not mean that Mr. Ghannouchi, they buy product only of the Zaytouna. He, of course, he educated in Zaytouna, but he's a product of the combination between modern institutions, modern education, as well traditional tradition. And I consider Mr. Ghannouchi as a great mujtahid in Islam as well democracy. The general perception is that Mr. Ghannouchi combined between Islam and democracy. Things are more complicated. Ghannouchi make ijtihad in Islam as well in democracy. For him, Islam is not, self-enclosed project. Of course, there are certain foundations and pillars in Islam, but Islam is a dynamic religion. It's subject of different views, different interpretations, different ijtihads. As well, democracy is not a self-enclosed project. Yes. There are different forms, different ways of democracy, and his main view is that we can have, as a Muslim, our own way of democratization and our own way of democracy. If democracy functions within a Protestant context, for example, in the United States, as well in Britain, North Europe, it functions within a Catholic context in South Europe, it functions within Hindu context in India. Why this democracy could not function within an Islamic framework, an Islamic, principles and values in the Muslim world? And this is maybe the top priority of the project of Mr. Ghannouchi.
So, Doctor, I think you mentioned about the situation in Tunisia, and I think in our last discussion in the public forum, you mentioned about the regional factors that led to that situation as well. Maybe you could explain to us what was the regional factors that led to the situation, and are that factors still exist to this time? I think you are the foreign minister by that time. You deal it firsthand with yourself.
And also maybe you mentioned briefly about Israel being like the primary trigger and hurdle against democracy. That's very interesting, and maybe elaborate on that and maybe even more.
Yeah, I think you can't escape from the geopolitics of the region, mainly in the Arab world. We are deeply interconnected. In the beginning, we assumed that Tunisia is a very exceptional case. I speak about the Tunisian exception, but concretely speaking, there is no exception because we are not immune from the regional environment. When you have a coup d'etat in Egypt, you have a civil war in Libya. At that time, you have civil war in Syria. You have also division and civil war in Yemen. Everywhere in the Arab world. And the political despotism, the dictatorship, authoritarianism, is very strong in the region. Mainly it is, wealthy despotism. They have a lot of money. So, and they consider democracy as a real threat. That's why you face an axis of, I call it axis of political despotism. They coordinate with themselves, and they have the means, the media, the money, and everything, to topple and to dismantle the democratic process in the region. They succeed in Egypt, and then they succeed in Libya, devising the country and to push it to civil war. Libya is a neighboring country. The same happened in Syria. So we are not immune from the regional environment. We are affected about what happened in other countries of the region. In addition to that, the Israeli factor, the Israelis were not happy, still not happy with any process of democratization. They see the process of democratization as a threat to their stability. Because if people, have more space of freedom, they bear in mind, they take the Palestinian question as a priority in their consideration. And this is what happened in Tunisia. Because they said, people are against these regimes as well, against occupation, the Israeli occupation. So different factors, regional factors. And I think the Arab world is cursed by two factors, the oil and Israel. The oil, did not help and still not helping the process freedom of democratization, as well the Israeli element.
Oil and Israel.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I think this my question is related to Dr. Badri's question. You mentioned about the regional influence, and I think you also mentioned briefly about the timeline in Tunisia. So I think this question would like to dig deeper. So looking back now, where do you think things began to unravel in Tunisia specifically? Was it institutional weakness, economic frustrations, polarizations, external pressures, or perhaps a combination of all these factors?
I think a combination of all factors. Political polarization is, in a nascent democracy, is a very negative, element. When you have a political division, although we tried, to have coalitions, and we have a coalition between what is called, moderate Islamists and moderate secularists. But the fringes of extremism on both sides, mainly within the secularist camp, was very strong. People, leftist strands and extremist ideology tried to compete Ennahda on the ballot box, but they can't. They failed. So they found the best way, to get rid of Ennahda, to get rid of the whole political system of the democracy. And it is becoming very common, and at that time it was very common, to speak what we do with democracy. Democracy is useless. We don't need democracy. We don't need this constitution. And then they discovered when they dismantled democracy, the alternative is very dangerous and worse than it was. So I think what happened in Tunisia is a combination of different factors, political division, the fragility of political institutions. We succeed to build, new political institutions, but still, fragile one. As a nascent democracy, was not a mature democracy. The other element is economy. Economy is very important. A genuine democracy could only functions on two pillars, political as well economic. We succeed, to build the new political institutions and to guarantee the public and private liberty of the people, which is very good, It's a real achievement. But unless you have a concrete achievements in economy and the general perception, although the economic situation was not, very bad, but the general perception due to the media, you are targeted by the media, it devalue your achievements. So the general perception of the people, we may get rid of from, or at least, within the elite, certain circles of elite. Why not, getting rid, dismantle this democracy, and then maybe the alternative will be better. But they discover the alternative is even worse. And that's why there is an admiration for the previous era. People are saying, we are living at least under a democracy, and our economy is not bad. But now, nowadays, no democracy and no economy at all. We lose both There is no achievement either in the political level, neither in either or nor in the economy. And this is the dilemma that facing Tunisia today.
You cannot lose both. Huh?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I think Dr. Rafik, you spent many years, I think, engaging with questions regarding political Islam, democracy and governance. I think with all the experience that we witnessed that Islamic movement had across the years, I think in Turkey, Malaysia, in Tunisia, and other part of the world, what is your assessment? The equation that should be between Islamic movement and democracy moving forward. I think what would be the trajectory for movement itself? Yeah.
Well, I think democracy is good, definitely, but democracy needs powers. It needs, tools. It's good to call for democracy and to fight for the process of democratization, but as long as you have to, the hard powers and the main tools, to protect the democracy, it could evaporate at any time. This is what we have discovered in Tunisia, even in Turkey itself. Bearing in mind 2016, I think 16, yes, they faced a coup d'etat, but they succeed,
Yes.
The people succeed, to fail that coup. And one of the lessons that was drawn since that time for Mr. Erdogan, that's good to have a democracy, but at the same time, if you haven't control of the state or the, let's say, the hard powers, at least to neutralize the hard powers from politics, it will remain in a fragile situation that could be threatened at any time.
So final question, Dr. Rafik. After everything Tunisia has gone through, the hopes, the setbacks, the imprisonments, the polarization, you still have hope for the restoration of democracy there?
Definitely. I still have, yeah.
And I think the second part is equally important for us here in the Southeast Asia. What should Malaysia learn from Tunisia experience so that we can avoid any mistakes?
I still have this esperance to the Tunisian democracy when I look at the ground, the concrete reality, that maybe our democracy is not ideal, it was fragile, but the alternative is even worse.
Yeah.
So for the people, they can make the comparison now. And this is one of the lessons that drawn not only by the elite, but the people as a whole, which is very good for the people, They draw a certain lesson that they have to preserve their democracy, because the alternative is not guaranteed that will be better than their democracy. Even if you face, certain difficulties and hardship in democracy, but this is a long process. You need to preserve it, and you need an accumulative process to build such a democracy. So this is makes me optimistic about the perspective, the future of the democracy in Tunisia, because, as I said, the alternative is a complete failure. When you have a regime who can't provide the food, who can't the necessary, demands, apply the necessary demands of the people, in addition to its dictatorship. If you look now at the political scene, hundreds of prisoners from different political strands, politicians, syndicalists, civil society activists, bloggers, journalists from different sectors, different strands. So the people under the bitterness of political sufferance, the bitterness of prisons, are becoming more aware about the importance of freedom and democracy. Compared to the previous era, 4 or 5 years, it was very common to hear that what we can do with democracy, it's a useless process. It's no longer the same discourse now. The discourse is becoming more and more positive, and the people as well, they're becoming more aware about the importance of freedom. One of the lessons that needed to be drawn from Tunisia is the necessity to empower, the political institutions. Democracy could not function within a fragile political institutions. I admire, and like Hannah Arendt, the German philosopher, who said one of the creativity of the modern times, not only of civilization, not only modern times, even the old times, that human being discovered that institutions could overcome the limit of the human beings, who as immortal human beings at the end of the day. But the institutions continue after, for generations after generations. So the eternity is to the political institutions or the social institutions, not to the human beings. We are all dying. This is the rule of the game. This is the rule of biology. Sunnatullah. We are limited human creatures. But the institutions could continue even after our death. So the institutions are very important. The independence of jurisprudence also, because democracy is not a formal project. Check and balances power is very important. But the main element of importance is to have an independent jurisprudence. As long you haven't, a guarantee of independence and transparent jurisprudence, you can't guarantee your democracy. It could be toppled, it could be fragmented at any time.
Well, that's very well said, Dr. Rafik. So thank you once again for being with us in our discussion in this podcast and for sharing not only your political insight but your personal reflection, not just a political activist. For me, as a philosopher, I think you are trained in philosophy, a diplomat and a country leader. I think what makes Tunisia's experience extraordinary is that it is not merely about a country but also a larger conversation about, as you said, democracy, political Islam, governance, political, and you said about institution that is very important. So,
yeah, and I think, and perhaps this is why conversations like this matter a lot, because beyond headlines and geopolitical analysis, Tunisia reminds us that democratic transitions are never linear. They are moving, they are dynamic, and that societies must constantly, as you mentioned, protect institutions, dialogue, and political maturity from polarization and authoritarian relapse. For countries like Malaysia, there are clearly important lessons to reflect upon, and not only about democracy but also coexistence, reform, and the importance of maintaining national consensus during moments of change. So I think throughout the discussion, throughout our conversations, we have learned a lot from this, and it's very refreshing to learn from your perspectives, not only as a top government official, but also the personal side of Rached Ghannouchi, and you are his family. So we have extra insights for this podcast.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So to all viewers and listeners, I think thank you for joining us, and until next time, inshallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.